74% of CEOs believe that their job is on the line because of AI. They're all working on AI initiatives, and the expectations are so high that if they mess it up, they fear that they'll lose their job over it.
3 years ago, the world changed. So quite frankly, you and I could have been in an island. We could have been in the Maldives somewhere, lost and eating bananas or whatever we want to eat. And then we get brought back the day that, everybody starts thinking about ChatGPT. You can't build the perfect product because by the time you do, there'll be 5 competitors that already released theirs. All these customers should have put suntan lotion on because they fired every ounce of cash they had in their budget towards any company that was doing AI. The stuff AI can do is unbelievable. What they're doing and what I've witnessed is incredible with agentic AI. Enterprises have no idea how far they could go with meaningful, productive automation.
This episode of VUX World is brought to you by NLX. NLX is the enterprise conversational AI automation platform used by some of the world's most loved and known brands. United Airlines, for example, use NLX to automate 64% of special requests. For example, things like I want to book a wheelchair onto a flight or I need special assistance, things like that. And what they do is they use the Voice Plus capability from NLX. And what that means is that when a customer calls, they'll be triaged to a self-service channel like their mobile app or the web, and the agent on the phone stays there. The AI agent will stay on the phone with you and guide you through that process. What that means is that you don't have to invest in all of those automation capabilities in the phone channel. You can leverage the investment that you've already made in your online self-service, and you can leverage the power of AI to help increase the effectiveness of those existing self-service journeys. Brilliant product, brilliant platform. If you are looking for an AI platform to fuel your business transformation, then look no further than NLX. You can find out more at nlx.ai. That is nlx.ai. Thank you very much, NLX, for sponsoring this episode of VUX World. The following is a conversation with Merlin Bise. Merlin is the CTO at Inbenta and the former CTO at GACT, which sold to the London Stock Exchange, and it provides critical data and infrastructure for financial services. Huge experience in the technology space, and it's very evident by hearing him speak, as you will do in a moment, that this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. This conversation, among other things, we talk about agentic RAG. Now, for most of you listening to this, you obviously are familiar with retrieval augmented generation, but you may not be familiar with the challenges that come along with it, in that dealing with ambiguity for RAG systems isn't necessarily a strong suit of them, because what tends to happen is when a customer says something that is a bit ambiguous or a lot ambiguous, retrieval augmented generation systems typically just want to answer the question, and that's where most of the problems lie, because the answer that customers get isn't going to be accurate. It's not going to be a hallucination, but it's just not going to be accurate. And so we talk about how agentic RAG can help you make that process a lot better. We talk about testing and the importance of testing in an agentic world, because not many organizations are doing it, I've got to tell you, but you have to. And we also talk about maybe some of the resistance and challenges that businesses are facing in adopting a more kind of agentic and generative AI agent kind of approach, because concerns about security, user experience, integrity, things like that. We talk about whether those concerns are well founded or whether they are not. And so without further ado, here's Merlin Bise of Inbenta on VUX World. All right, Merlin Bise, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, man. Nice to meet you, Kane.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.
Likewise.
Texas, you're in, yeah?
I am. North Dallas, nice and hot. So
yeah, well, we've got one of those rare days in the UK here where it's actually pretty warm, but probably not your kind of warm. Today's probably, what is it on my watch, 25 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, it's a little bit cooler than us. I always enjoyed going to London in August or July to get a break from the Texas heat. So
yeah. Most people go to London in July to get some heat in the UK. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I know you're a busy guy, so thanks for spending some time. Really appreciate it. Why don't we start by telling us a little bit about yourself? I know you've got a lot of experience in the tech space, investment and all that kind of stuff. Like you've kind of been there and done it in many cases. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what interested you initially about Inbenta and what you're doing there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've spent about 25 plus years. I'm not going to give my complete age away in tech. And obviously, fraud and risk was a big play for us. We ran a business for 16 years, and then we sold that business in that space. That's kind of what got me connected overseas. Is we sold that to the London Stock Exchange Group and gave us an opportunity to take that business global. And naturally, machine learning and AI was a big part of that. I've always been intrigued by it. I've always thought that at some point compute would maybe outpace software or at least catch up so we could do some magical things. And so my interest was really high on AI related companies, specifically around NLP. We use NLP, obviously, in fraud and risk in a lot of different areas. And so had an opportunity, unique opportunity to look at Inbenta as an investor. We made the acquisition of it. I mean, Inbenta is a great company. It's been around now, I think, going on 18, 19 years. It was originally founded and built in Barcelona, had their own proprietary NLP, just a incredible platform. So we had a chance to acquire that. In just a few short months after that acquisition, ChatGPT hit, and naturally the world changed and got a little more excited. So, my initial plan was to be an investor and continue in the fraud and risk space. That kind of pivoted because I anticipated that software development was going to be turned upside down. How we delivered applications, technology, automation, all of that was going to shift. I mean, that was pretty obvious just from the first view of what the tool could do. I was standing there with a colleague at LSEG, and he was an executive previously at Informatica. Him and I were talking about how many APIs Informatica managed and how they acquired and moved data and just what the impact of AI could do there. So I pivoted. I left in early 24, came to Inbenta. I was very familiar with the CEO. She was the CEO of Gaiac. And so we had a long-standing relationship working together. And it was a no-brainer to come and join tech and run it. Obviously, I had wonderful colleagues at LSEG. I've got to meet tremendously gifted people at Inbenta. We're truly a global operation. We're in 5 different locations throughout the world. And so right now, we're like everybody else. We're modernizing and innovating as fast as we can, because if you're going to be in this game, you can't be on a scooter. I mean, you'll appreciate this. You're either going to be in a Aston Martin or Ferrari. You don't really have a choice if you're going to play, because it is crazy, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and add to that the general kind of like busyness in the marketplace as well. It's difficult for kind of like customers to make decisions. It's difficult for brands to compete, startups to compete. There's loads of startups coming around now that are trying to leverage Gen AI and stuff like that. And then in terms of kind of like from the brand side, as a buyer, you're thinking, well, where do I even start? So it's a very messy place, and you kind of need to have, you need to make the right decision, because there's research out there. I think it was Data IQ that published some research in conjunction with I forget the research company now, but essentially the stat is that 74% of CEOs believe that their job is on the line because of AI, as in not that AI is going to replace them because it's so good and clever, but they're all working on AI initiatives, and it's so kind of like high impact, or at least the expectations are so high that if they mess it up, they fear that they'll actually lose their job over it because the stakes are that high.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I was just at Gardner. I can't remember the actual the heading of the conference.
One of the symposiums or something like that, was it?
Yeah, just was there in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and I will tell you, every booth, other than a few. I mean, SAP was there and a few other Broadcom, some really well-known names, but almost every booth was somebody building a different proprietary agentic framework. So they're building their own proprietary. So I think the challenge CEOs have is sometimes they're going to bet on the wrong kind of the wrong horse. And Inbenta, and again, you're spot on. They're absolutely being looked at. What are they doing to leverage AI? It's all about productivity. That's where it's shifting. Investors want to know, how are you going to become more productive? How are we going to lower costs? How do we should be investing in people to sell our solutions, not to automate or do these simple tasks. And so we've taken a different approach. And I tell customers this, and they look at me funny at first, but I'm like, listen, if I'm really good at this, you should be able to fire me if you don't like me. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, here's the deal. I mean, if we actually help you transform data, which is the foundation of this stuff working, if you don't have data, organized or structurally done right, your automations and everything else is going to fall apart. But essentially, I'm like, listen, if we help you bring data in, whether it's content that's 20 years old or it's fresh web content, whatever it is, you decide. You have a big giant box of information, and we're going to help you basically create intelligence off that. But when it comes to frameworks, I mean, we obviously have proprietary NLP and how we serve customers through the simplistic expanded, whether it's a more of an assistant around like a compact assistant, chat interface, or whether it's an intelligent contextual search or something of that nature. But really what it comes down to is, if you package data right, anybody should be able to transform and use that data. Second of all, when it comes to these, agents in this automation path, in a lot of ways, we've built an agentic framework. It had to be very complex because these typical agent builders that are out there, and there's some really good ones that anybody can use. You and I could play with them and build our own little agents to make our lives more interesting. But when it comes to that, we've built a lot of that. We've built ourselves internally to, for onboarding and different things. And we'll build agents for customers, but we've also found it's very compelling to expose, webhooks for automation and things, and let them bring their own agents, let them build them themselves. And I've told customers this, I said, you got to be very careful, because a lot of the AI deployments are failing, and a lot of them are failing because it's a proprietary, platform. You're doing everything one way, and then it's got to be adaptable to your business. And I just think that we've taken a little different approach. We're trying to be a lot more open. And so what it allows us to do is, we typically can go into an organization that may have invested, $100,000, $1 million, $5 million, and say, hey, how do we fit? How can we accelerate your AI journey? And you show us your plan. We'll give you some advice and see how we fit. But if we can't bring value, we shouldn't be partnering with you. And so I've really, hammered that with my tech leads and people that's working with our CSMs and our salespeople. Let's make sure we bring value, because you are correct. This is a arms race, so to speak. A lot of people's jobs are on the line from a C-level perspective, because again, if they make a bad decision, example, we met, I'm not going to say the name of the customer, but they're in the credit space. They invested a lot of money working with one of the big three in the US and can never get it deployed. It wasn't that the tech didn't work. They chose the wrong consultant / technical partner. And so we had a great, and we've won that deal. We had an opportunity to go in there and, for a fraction of what they'd already spent, solve it for them, not completely throw away all their strategy and ideas, but we quickly solved it. And again, it comes with, 18 plus years experience. We've, did a lot of things right. We've done a few things wrong, but guess what? Whether you do it right or wrong, you're going to learn, because AI is about becoming more and more efficient. And where there's technical apparatuses or opportunities to improve, we're doing it. And so, but yeah, I don't disagree. It is the noise in the market is crazy. And I am a little frustrated. So some of the startups, if you're building an AI tool to maybe code or build agents or something like that, it's extraordinarily popular right now. But there's a lot of clever startups that I don't think is probably getting the play time, or the it's a little difficult for them. I think part of it is the model cost. If it's 100% AI based, depending on how efficient you're utilizing these large models, can determine whether or not you have success. And a lot of people don't realize some of these open source models are quite good, but they don't know how to test them properly. They don't know how to execute strategy properly on them. So they just defaultly go to the two big boys, and that's OpenAI and Anthropic, which are excellent companies and orgs. But I think that's going to be the play. And then, Facebook obviously is going to spend whatever amount of money they have to spend to try to catch up. So Meta is. So, but yeah, it's crazy. I think there's a ton of noise, and I think it's very confusing for most businesses.
It is, yeah. And I think you could probably include Google in that list as well because they've been
But
really,
yeah, absolutely.
hammering
I
it
always
lately.
forget Google. I'm sorry, Google.
And people do, but they've been doing really well. I mean, the
They
latest.
have, and one quick thing. So, um, Google actually, they're ahead of, I think, everybody else when it comes to on the data side, data processing. So you're talking about being able to process documents, just from an easy codability standpoint, videos and things. And then Gemini has made rapid improvements. We use Google. I mean, absolutely, Google's part of our strategy with our customers. Anthropic and OpenAI are the other two, but Google's an excellent. And Amazon's got, Bedrock's obviously a great platform to deploy and build on too. So,
How do you think about it then? Because I think you're in a fairly unique position in not just Inbenta, but I suppose like looking at this industry. Because a lot of the companies that we have on here, who you would probably consider Inbenta competitors, they're people who've kind of like most of these organizations are founder led. Some of them are changing these days as they've started to grow. They've brought in external leadership and stuff like that, but like still a lot of them are still like a lot founder led, and so that means that the founder has kind of been there since the beginning, built the product to where it is kind of gone through probably the chatbot wave, the Alexa wave, the initial wave of chatbots in enterprise, then they're going through the Gen AI wave. Whereas what's interesting from kind of like hearing what you're kind of talking about is that you've come into Inbenta not necessarily from a company that has been, its bread and butter is providing AI capabilities to other companies. So you've got a perspective on it which is a bit more objective. So you can come in there with a fresh pair of eyes and look at the market, look at Inbenta and understand what's what and where you should be playing. How do you kind of like go about figuring out where Inbenta ought to be? Because as you mentioned, you've got Amazon Bedrock, decent platform. You've got all these models doing really well. Open source, I think, is very much a dark horse, as you say. I agree with that. There's a lot of value to be had there for those that explore it. So, and then you're saying that like Inbenta, you want people to bring their own agents if they need to, and they can connect into it with an API, etc. So, what is it that if companies are bringing their own agents, what is it that Inbenta's doing then? How would you describe Inbenta to someone who hasn't heard of it before?
yeah, I mean, let's start in the beginning. Real quick. So Inbenta we have our own conversational AI platform. One of the unique things we offer is, and we've modernized that tech, we've done significant work with the NLP. So there's a lot of and this is what separates us from our competitors from an affordability standpoint. 90+% of the transactions are being processed on our own tech. We simply use large models to add contextual understanding where it's needed and to basically triage content. That's the magic of building very advanced agentic framework. So we've got agents that can reason and think and help fill content gaps, fix automation issues and things in real time, where a lot of our competitors have made a choice A or B. If conversation doesn't work, we're fully hybrid. We're going straight to large model. So we've taken a different approach there. So that I want to just clarify that it gives us a huge advantage over our competitors from not only an accuracy standpoint where we can almost virtually guarantee no hallucinations, but when you look at affordability, no one's going to be more affordable long term than us because we don't have to rely exclusively on large models. In saying that, how's it relevant? I mean, this may offend some people, but I don't care how much experience you have in AI. 3 years ago, the world changed. So quite frankly, you and I could have been in an island. We could have been in the Maldives somewhere, lost and eating bananas or whatever we want to eat. And then we get brought back the day that, everybody starts thinking about ChatGPT. It doesn't take long to figure it out. So what I've done here is I've got some of the most bright, young, energetic minds that I could find that are, chasing dreams. And guess what? Them guys are the best people we have in the building. So we've went, I understand this conceptually. I've been doing machine learning forever. But we've got really smart, intelligent people that spend a lot more time on this than probably the one of us. They live, sleep, and drink it. They're building agents and, experimenting with every framework you would know. And conceptually, that's what you got to have. I've got a whole team of them people. You've got to have people that are chasing greatness because the landscape's changed. This is not an NLP game. This is a large model embedding game. This is about making sure you fundamentally have a really good conversational engine that is intelligent yes, NLP does play a role. I mean, obviously, when you're doing synonym swapping and some of these other things, you have to build very, very compelling systems to do that, to maintain great accuracy. But at the end, and then the other thing I would add, one of the things that we do that's kind of cool is we build fingerprints or DNA of a customer. You could call it a customer dictionary or lexicon, but we've already always fundamentally built out a kind of a framework based on that individual customer versus trying to lump them in likewise or like-sized businesses. So when somebody works with us, just the level of accuracy and understanding and transparency they have is unlike any competitor. But things have shifted so greatly that it wasn't as hard because of the timing in which we acquired the business. But you are correct. Most of our competitors have original founders. But again, them businesses were built like ours on a kind of complete different framework than what exists today.
So that makes sense. So you mentioned earlier that you mentioned that part of what Inbenta has is a bunch of proprietary technologies that leverage large language models to add where they can. Part of that being, you said, fixing things like usability problems. Is that what you said?
I mean, it could be usability issues, it could be content, it could be automation opportunities. I mean, when you talk about building complex agentic frameworks, realistically, I think that's the greatest value right now in the conversational AI space is there's gaps. So there's gaps in phrases, titles, intents, things like that. We've got a product offering that'll get announced later this year called Elevate, which is essentially that. It's where it triages a variety of different things. It builds on it, solves it in real time. You can choose to have it solve issues, and then you come back and can manually approve them, or you can turn it on autonomously where it'll do it. So, I mean, you could basically take an agentic framework, make it into an AI agent if you wanted to manually intervene. But these are things a lot of our competitors are not doing. They may be building, some automated dialogues and things like that, but they're not spending enough time to make sure the customer's serving up, basically there's going to be content gaps. I mean, that every business is going to have it. And so typically what we find is content gaps are caused by two issues. It's on ingestion, where basically, your crawler or your scraper, whatever technology you're using, is not capable of getting the dynamic content that's necessary sometimes to build out these particular intents and phrases. And then in some cases, it's simply the customer's not provided you all the content necessary. So some of that content could exist publicly. That's up to a customer and their risk tolerance. But in most cases, the content's already there. It's just not been positioned or ingested properly. So these are where these systems can basically fix that information, recompile it, deliver it in real time. When I talk about triage, I'm talking about triaging while you're interacting with the system, not necessarily later, unless you want to do it manually later.
So where's it getting the data from? Though I'm missing it.
Yeah. So let me break it down this way. So we basically, let's say we had 20 different data sources. We have web content off a website. We may have a help site, an FAQ site. So we pull that data in. That's a couple of resources. Then we have 15 or 16 different data assets that we're acquiring through an API. Maybe you have a knowledge management system with another provider. You're working with one of these large customer service centers. You have a variety of tickets, whatever it would be. So we're pulling data in through an API. Then you also have a subset, you have a OneDrive or a Google Drive folder with, 1 million documents. All this is content. But when that content's brought in and organized and standardized, we're going to build all the necessary things to serve your customer. We're going to build intents off of that. We're going to build model phrases. We're going to build all the key pieces to be able to serve that with great accuracy. Here's the thing, even if you're using a combination of NLP and large model embeddings, there's always an opportunity where there's a gap. For some reason, it didn't create the exact intent it needed. So typically what we see out of the box is 94, 95% accuracy or higher. We're very good at this. I mean, we've been doing it a long time. But in order to get that customer to a 98, 99% accuracy range, you're going to have to do some refinements. So naturally, when you apply large models to that, whether it's Anthropic, OpenAI, or even Google, all of them perform very similar. They can triage that content where they can basically search in a broader net than a typical conversational NLP system would do just in broad. We're talking about, we have a product called File Search, or Free File Search, which is an NLP search that does that wide, but it takes a lot longer than a large model would. And so we use a large model to go look at all the content. We typically already have the content, but it needs to repackage that particular intent or that particular information to be able to solve that gap. And it can do that in real time, or it can bring back a suggestion. Customer can look at it, decide if they want to approve it, and move on. The other opportunity you have is if you have a customer that may be serving the public interest, a city, county government, or somebody like that, where it's all public accessible data they're using, they may choose to, hey, let's look at the public domain to see whether or not that exists. And then a search can be done. It may take a little bit of time, but a large model can do that search. Again, build that content. They would want to approve that. You wouldn't use public information in real time without approval. But that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Is the data is probably already there for whatever reason. No system's perfect. Anybody says it's perfect, they're not being honest. But we'll use large models to triage because large models can search faster with large quantities of data. They just can.
Right. So, am I understand this correctly then? So, for example, there's an organization, they have multiple data repositories full of content, and they want to create some kind of interaction with the customer where they're able to search and retrieve and summarize that content in a retrieval augmented generation setting, for example. And you may, so basically you would do that as you would, but then is it that you are potentially either not ingesting all the content, you're just ingesting the bits that you think are most relevant?
We're getting all the content. The challenge is NLP might not build intents for certain aspects of the content. If the content maybe strategically or structurally doesn't fit with a certain intent that's required. This is an agentic RAG, essentially, is what I'm talking about.
Right.
Maybe I should start there.
Right. Yeah.
These agents are smart enough to know, hey, I need to go look for this subject and see whether or not if an intent was correctly created. Because when you build out, in the past, NLP was you would ingest data, and then the customer would give you a list of, you take all their questions and answers they've had in their support ticket system, and you would build intents kind of off of that. That's not how it works anymore. We can actually automate intent building just off the content, which we've done. The advancement of that with agentic RAG is the ability for these agents. You have multiple agents. They're going to look at content based on the challenge. So if it's a partial answer where the customer says, yeah, that kind of answers it, but not completely, so they rate it, whatever it would be, that agentic system, that particular agent gets fired off. He goes and looks at content, looks at what the intent is. Can I improve this? This is in real time. I don't have to touch nothing. Can I improve it? Yeah, let me restructure it this way. It would have answered the question better. And then therefore a new intent's created. That's what I'm talking about. So the data typically is there. It's very rare it's not. There's a chance. There can be a content gap, and that's where a content creator exists for customers. It'll build the content, show them what it's built. They can improve it, adjust it, and then save it, and then it creates the phrases and intents and titles. That can be done from the public domain, but in most cases the data's there. It's just the intent in the phrases, which is a big problem. It's a big gap because most of our competitors can sit and say that they're running at 90+%. But when we go head to head with them, most conversational solutions are running at 85%. They're still not where they should be. Now, are they going to get there? I think they are, because large models large model embeddings are incredibly accurate. They're just much better, I think, than NLP at matching logic. And I think the large models are getting more affordable. I think you're going to see much better accuracy. But currently today, there's still a lot of organizations that have chatbots that are running 80 to 85%, which is just it's not up to snuff. There's no reason in any case for an organization not to have a high 90s, assistant that's able to answer questions and work with customers and get a contextual feeling of why that customer is asking that question or wanting that answer.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think that part of the challenge with RAG is that the idea of the query from the customer having a bit of ambiguity there. And what most RAG systems will do is they'll just pull back whatever they can pull back, summarize an answer, and they've probably got two bits of conflicting information. So are you saying there then that this is where you would utilize this type of thing?
You just, and that would have been probably great if I would use that example. So that's why you're in your seat. But yes, we could have saved ourselves probably 10 minutes. But that is exactly correct. That is probably the biggest use case in it, because today in traditional conversational products, you've got a team that has to look at that, and they have to work with the customer to determine that. With these large models and agentic RAG, from a contextual understanding, it can figure that out in real time. The agent can go repackage that content. And then basically, as long as in most cases, they can come back real time and tell the customer, were you talking about this? Because you want to give the customer a chance too in real time to do feedback, which we have mechanisms to do that. Did this help you? This answer your question? No, I was asking more. It's got to be able to understand it. But yeah, the ambiguity is a major issue that, we don't have as much because we got 18 years. Our large enterprise customers are well tuned. They've worked with us forever, so they have high 90 systems. But new customers, clearly agentic RAG and these kind of intelligent agents that run around and do this stuff is the fastest way to improve. I mean, there's just no question, but that is spot on what's going on. That's the biggest issue we see.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's interesting. You also referenced earlier on testing. So these systems, well, I actually come across an organization this week or a few weeks ago, by the time people listen to this, that said that they do not do any testing. They build their agent, they deploy it, and they basically learn from customers. Now, Benoit, our MD, basically said that they're still doing testing. They're just doing it. They're getting the customer to test it, which I suppose is true because they're learning from the customer interaction. But the risk there is that you put something live that's substandard rather than having that 90% kind of or 99% that you suggested. That's where you might go out with 80%, try and optimize it in the wild type of thing. Maybe you might not go out at 80% because you don't know because you haven't done any testing. So they're kind of like, how do you approach testing? Because I think that large language models lure you into this possibly false sense of security, which is that when I just play around with it, it looks all right. So therefore it must be fine. So we're just going to go live. Is that the approach that you have? Do you trust these models enough to just deploy, or do you do anything specific to test these things?
No, I mean, it comes back to the fundamental software game. I've been in this a long time. You can't build the perfect product because by the time you do, there'll be 5 competitors that already released theirs. But you have to build what I would classify as a very stable release, which requires testing. Therefore, your customer feedback is going to drive, improvements. There's no question. But you can't deploy these large models without testing and some form of feedback to an audit trail, essentially, to our customers. And so we have two levels that our customers get. They get production and pre-production. So we actually, if the customer wanted to, they can go in pre-production and even compare. So they can take what they currently have deployed with us, or if they're using a competitor, they can actually do real-time A/B type testing to see how it's going to perform. But keep in mind, our reliance on large models, I want to be real clear, this is completely different than most of our competitors. We use large model embeddings because they're super affordable, and that combination with NLP is off the charts from an accuracy standpoint. So that's building up front. That's a brand new customer bringing us data. We're ingesting it. We're building all the information out necessary to serve their customers, whether it would be through automation, a chat interface, a smart assistant that's compact, or some type of a search helps. It doesn't matter. It's still the same. We're going to use large model embeddings in NLP. The second phase of that is we're going to use these large models for kind of what I was talking about, the agentic RAG side of this, doing triage, building content, them kind of things, building contextual understanding much better than what traditional, models have been in the past. So we're not reliant on turning large models loose, on the farm, so to speak. Now, I'll get to the agents in one second. In saying that, there's scorecards that are maintained. And so when we go to deploy, we have an extensive testing process where we're going to not only have human testers working with this, we're going to want the customer to test. There's a sequence of events that have to happen before we would go live. And then there's a monitoring aspect of this where we're going to monitor activity in, near real time for a period of time to make sure we maintain accuracy. There'll be some content warnings that, hey, large models, which we suggest that our customers utilize. It's on our website too, that a large model may be involved in, performing this answer, responding to your question. So, but there's going to be extensive monitoring. We're not just going to turn it loose in the wild because again, there's a relationship and there's two ways relationships are formed. They're forced or it's trust. And so customers have to be able to trust us as an expert to give them great advice and make sure we use best practices. From an agent standpoint, we take a three-pronged approach, and we do this to every customer. This is probably going to be old-fashioned. Some people may not like it, but first thing is we want to make sure that we use some type of rule-based automation. We call it AI workflows. We're going to basically put the customer through that, make sure they have great success clicking a button and it works, or there's a sequence of events. Someone says, I need to reset my password inside of a interface, and it says, oh, great, ask a question, it fires it off. That's a rules-based automation. Then we're going to deploy, that's first. Then we're going to deploy an agent. So that customer has an agent back there, and the agent knows if this happens and this happens, I can fire off and do these 8 or 10 things. So, but it's an actual agent that has a little bit more freedom. We're not talking agentic yet. It's not doing all of it on its own, but it can do some things. It can make decisions based on 4 different outcomes. If this outcome happens, it can do this. So it's a multitasker, or you could have multiple agents still not being agentic that can do multiple tasks, but it's a rules-based and an agent. Then we're going to deploy, from an agentic side, I almost call it a manager. I know that's probably a simplistic way to put it, but that agentic side is that manager has the ability to say, agent 1, 2, 3, and 4, go do this. And it can basically score them, their work, correct them if they're doing something wrong. So then you build out an agentic, again, that's a simplistic example, but you can build out a more sophisticated agentic flow where it can do all kinds of things. But we always make them crawl, walk, run. And I would say 90% of our customers are probably in the rules-based automation game. Probably 6 to 8% are in that agent space doing stuff. The rest are now wanting to explore agentic, along with potential of, full-blown avatars, all kind of crazy stuff. But everybody's talking about agentic, but in enterprise world, there's still a lot of, I would not say skepticism, but there's still a lot of fear because again, you give an agentic agent in their mind access to the OneDrive or to SharePoint or Google Drive, and it goes crazy, then our files are everywhere. And that's not, again, even if you give it permissions, you can still build guardrails. Even though it can make its own decisions, there's still ways to build guardrails. But that's kind of our approach on how we tackle that is, we work with the customers, we test, specifically with agents and automation. There is a lot of testing, and there's typical multiple sessions because, again, our customers and the impact we're dealing, and if you look at our customer base and look at some of the things we've published, we've got the largest genealogy organization in the world. I mean, they're 1.5 plus billion and growing. We have a ton of banks, insurance carriers, credit space providers, some in the UK. So, I mean, when you look at, global airlines, manufacturers of some of the greatest cars, a lot in the German side of the world. And so when you look at the type of customer we have, right now there's a call with the largest software org in the world. I chose this podcast over that, which is fine. But that's a big opportunity for us. And when we talk about automation, specifically, this 3-step approach is exactly what they're doing because they have customers that if they mess up, it's going to cause them a lot of frustration and problems. So I just think that, we err on the side of safety when it comes to customers. And by the way, it doesn't take years to test. I mean, it's AI. You could actually build, and I hate to say this, but you could build an agent, which we have in a couple of cases, that tests for you and build scorecards. So I think you'll find agentic agents there'll be a lot more agentic testing done in the future where these agents just know when it gets published to fire off. And that's what we're working on right now is actually in our back office, probably early next year, we're going to have agentic agents you can deploy to test your answering and all the different automation tasks that you may want to schedule on our platform. The technology's there. We just have to deploy it, but testing's critical. I just, again, in enterprise world, it's super critical.
And so when you were referring to there that customers tend to start more rules-based and then they'll move to an agent and then they'll move to that orchestration sort of phase, are you referring there to stages of the product life cycle, as in they do the rules-based thing, put that live, get some value, and then go on? Or are you referring to the project level?
No. It's absolutely, I think, value. They could skip to 3, but I think it works well for them. Most of them do not want to spend because, again, when you get into agentic framework, there's compute cost and things like that everybody kind of dismisses initially. That's why companies like N8N and others charge automation fees for some of their work, because they have to pay for compute. So it's typically more the customer that wants to run. I mean, we call them pilots. You could call them POCs, but a lot of customers still want to run pilots because in 24, it was a year of burn. I mean, honestly, all these customers should have put suntan lotion on because they ran out and fired every ounce of cash they had in their budget towards any company that was doing AI. And that's why a lot of this they're still cratering in 25. By 26, you're going to have a much more savvy buyer. They're going to understand, I think, this a little bit better. And so they're going to be more critical of who they do business with and where they spend their capital. But I think realistically, most companies want to, create pilots, specifically around automation. It's easier in the, building out a search or a chat interface or something like that. That's table stakes. But I think when you're talking about building out automation, they're going to want to, run some type of pilot that's rules-based quickly into an agent-based. And if that value's there and they can see the ability for us to do more advanced automation with them as a customer, then they move into the agentic framework. Because again, now we got to figure out, do they want us to build that on our platform? Or do they want to bring, they already have it, they want to use an N8N, they want to use LangChain, whatever they're working on, or they want to use another framework and they want to tie into some stuff we've built. We have to know that. And so that's where, from a pilot standpoint, is typically rules-based and maybe an agent to perform automation. And then we move into the agentic conversation. That's typically where we move into production on automation. But now I'm not saying that's the right way. Someone could just come and say, you need to build us an agentic farm that does, automate 75 tasks. I'm not going to turn that away. I'm like, great, let's roll. But I think in most cases, organizations are wanting to do pilots because of, there's a lot of people who's got burnt.
Yeah, and there was a really good I can't remember the fella's name now. Someone from Gartner that was talking about how kind of like agentic AI is, as you suggested there, not ready necessarily for enterprise. But then there's some companies now, Santander's one. There's a couple of other companies I've come across lately who are kind of like launching more, generative agents, you could say. I mean, I still call them chatbots because fundamentally a lot of them are doing the same type of thing. They're still taking an input from a customer. They've got instructions about the business process. They've got instructions about the tools. They've got access to tools. So you're still giving it a goal. So you're taking away some autonomy because you're telling it what you want it to do. You're giving it explicit instructions about the business process and all that kind of stuff and what it needs to do and when. And so you're still giving it's still rules based in a sense because you're still giving it the rules. It's just that you're using Gen AI to interpret the rules and manage the dialogue and stuff like that. That seems to be still a risk for some companies. I've noticed that most companies now are getting round to it. But earlier on, you mentioned that, like, hallucinations for RAG, for example, for Inbenta are pretty much a non-issue. What is the issue that is perceived by enterprises when it comes to that, not the rule-based chatbot intent-based stuff, but the more end-to-end generative agent type of thing? What are the risks and the barriers that customers are telling you about when you're talking to them about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's twofold. I talked to a major airline. I mean, here in the U.S., they fly everywhere, but their feedback to me was they worked on this stuff internally and they had a lot of problems. So that's probably one of the reasons is they've tried to do this themselves and it's cratered and failed. So that makes them scared. It's like if you got in a super fast car and you jump the curb 5 minutes after getting in it, you probably don't want to get on a racetrack. Now, if you knew how to drive the car, you probably wouldn't jump the curb, be different. But this is the challenge: is AI has been available. So you and I, forget I'm in Inbenta, we could go start our own AI company, in 5 minutes after this podcast, and we could simply, get access to every AI model we want. I mean, it's that simple. It's not hard. So that's number one. I think they've tried and failed. The second is there's so many people, there's so much noise. So there's multiple conversations from all fronts. But the real thing is cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, I talked to a government official in the US last week. We're trying to work on an opportunity that's pretty substantial that would involve the government here. And clearly the government needs to move. Obviously, you've seen the investment they're making in AI and data centers, but they need internal AI products and solutions. So one of the things he talked about, my cybersecurity, just can't have these agents running around with access. I mean, that's just how people view it. It's almost like they're correlating an agent to a human. And, you wouldn't give the janitor access to your critical documents, your accounting, your HR, but that's not the case. And your description was spot on where, you type in what you want it to do and not doing all that. Yeah, that agent will go do it, but you are correct. You're giving them a set of rules. It's like you're telling your child, you can only do this. And if you don't do this, you don't get candy and you're going to bed early. It's the same thing when you're typing that information in and having that dialogue with that agent. And so agentic means that agent has access. He's acting on circumstances, no different than you and I. He can think on his own. If the place is on fire, he knows to, maybe pull the fire alarm or get the extinguisher and then get out of the building. So he can do all that kind of stuff without you telling him or her that. I think the problem is the magic of agentic AI is not outweighing the concerns. And the concerns, in my view, are being stoked by cybersecurity, media contents, no different than the financial markets. And it's kind of certain people's view. The people that are talking about the safety of agents and how awesome agents are not loud enough voices yet. Every org we talk to wants to pursue agentic AI. They just have this fundamental fear. The way Inbenta gets them over fear is building trust. We help them accelerate the rules-based automation, make it more powerful, show them how agents are fully controlled and can make that even better. And then ultimately we gain enough trust, we can deploy agentic AI. I mean, the stuff agentic AI can do is unbelievable. I'll try to set you up later in the year with these young guys I'm working with. It's a AI company that's building some crazy cool automation tools around coding to connect APIs and things that going to be very fascinating, but that'd be great content for you. But I will tell you that what they're doing and what I've witnessed is astronomically incredible with agentic AI. And enterprises have no idea just how I think far they could go with meaningful, productive automation that could really transform and change how they do business, make them much more efficient, allow them to shift some of their human capital to more of their core business to drive more revenue, which, by the way, from an economic standpoint, everybody's going to have to get more efficient. But I think, again, it's cybersecurity and it's noise that's still creating, and maybe they tried it in the past and it scares them to death. And it's going to require organizations like ours or large organizations to be able to convince them. I mean, Amazon's working hard on it. We're an AWS shop. I know Microsoft's got a lot of different frameworks and a lot of content trying to get enterprise customers more engaged with it. But it's going to take a little bit because, again, our typical enterprise customer still is on the fence, even though they know they're going to have to do something.
When a customer or when a business is on the fence and they have cybersecurity concerns about agentic AI, I know you're saying that there's ways that you get around it, whatever. But when a business has these cybersecurity concerns, are any of them well founded?
I don't, in Inbenta's case, I don't believe so, because Inbenta has an extraordinarily secure platform. We meet all the standards and certifications. And what we're simply telling customers is, listen, and this is where it's a simplistic view, but I said, listen, you got a glass box. So inside that glass box, you can shove anything you want in there. Every ounce of data, information on anything, okay? You can determine if you want a public or private facing tool, which that could be an assistant, that could be AI automation, and again, we're telling our customers, even if you build an agentic agent, it needs to control a subset of automation tasks. So we're not telling them, just give it access to everything in the building and tell it to go wild, do whatever it wants to do. That's not, but you need to give it a playground and let it be able to make decisions in that playground. And so I don't believe it is, because again, the customer owns the data. We've built the right guardrails to mean that if this particular agentic farm only works in private content, which could be employee records or financial records, whatever it would be, customer financial data, this agentic framework works in the public domain. So what you and I might search their website for, we need to create a support case. Again, it's all public facing. This is not rockets. This is not trade secrets, schematics to an airplane. This is public domain information. So I don't believe it is. I think, and again, we've talked to organizations that's done extensive. As an example, we had a large bureau here in the U.S. We worked for 4 weeks, not 4 days, 4 weeks with their cybersecurity experts to really re-educate them on the benefit of true AI, how it was going to be used. It's their data. We're not using our own data. So I don't believe it is, completely founded, but you have to be, you obviously have to respect it, and you have to work through it and help them understand it and guide them through that process.
What about the other side of things then? So that's data connectivity and governance and stuff like that around access to data.
Yes.
The other kind of part that, again, and I think the tide's changing, because the more companies I speak to, a lot of them are more keen to actually do this, because I think they do see the benefit in terms of like how natural these Gen AI systems can make conversations, and how kind of like the allure of ease as well. I don't agree that it's actually easy to do this stuff well, but the allure of ease and speed is important. But the other sort of lingering concern, is that if you're able to satisfy the data security side of things, the next layer of concern is in the customer experience side of things, which is that even if we're happy to give it access to data, are we entirely happy that it's going to use that data in conversation responsibly? Which goes back to that question of hallucination. So in the RAG world, hallucinations have been very much improved. The jury is still out, correct me if I'm wrong, around the agentic or from an agent perspective, managing a multi-turn dialogue. There was some research published a couple of weeks ago which stated that large language models basically just lose their place in conversation after more than 10 turns. Now, again, that can be managed with state management and context management. It'll give it short-term memory and stuff like that. So there's ways and means of doing this. But for those enterprises that are kind of looking at this thinking, okay, you've resolved my data security concern. Now resolve my concern regarding, is it going to do something irresponsible with that data? How do I secure or guarantee or measure or make sure that the interaction with a customer has integrity?
Yeah, that's actually a loaded but very, very good statement there. So the way we've done that is we typically tell them, like, let me use an example. We have an HR platform that we integrate with. We're one of their solution providers, and very large organization. One of their divisions is in the UK, but they bought 3 different companies. And this was a question that was brought up. They wanted us to build, and we've done it, an automation framework. I could say, hey, I want to take 3 days off in December. And basically it asked me a follow-up question. Is this for PTO, or, is it health related PTO? And it's great. We're working on it. So that agent then goes and gets all the approvals, checks all the information. It just knows based on that content to fire off and do everything it needs to do. Then it's going to send out a response. If you're still in that particular assistance, if you got it open, it'll send you a response back there as well as email. One of the things we've done is anytime automation's being done where there's a communication, okay? So I've already engaged you. You've not had to answer your name, employee numbers, all that. I can go figure that out, but because it's authenticated. But the problem is, how do we handle it if the automation didn't do it right? It shows the wrong dates, all that. So we typically send a summary of what the completed entire thing was. And there's a link there saying, this didn't go right, or, blah, blah, blah. You click that, and that's going to take you into a live, interaction with a true AI assistant where you can tell it what's wrong. And then you can build a triage agent too to try to fix it. So that could be run in the background, where you could try to correct it, tell it what happened, and then it's smart enough, it can reason, do its own thing. It can look to correct it. If it can't, and it sends you back a summary, you click that goes into a live interaction. where I'm now dealing with a human. So we typically build two layers of correction, AI assisted into human. I mean, honestly, that is the smartest way to get them over it. Ultimately, I will tell you, you are right. These large models have improved. I mean, when you look where we were a year ago to today, I mean, it's like we had a wooden, model of a car. Now we have, a fully built car, or a tricycle. Now it's a bike. I mean, it is astronomical, the accuracy and intelligence these models have. But that's how we really look at it, is we build some level of course correction that can be maintained. Now there's other automations that it gets messed up in the background, and that's where scorecards matter. And so what we allow is a alert to go out saying, hey, you need to review, processed automation. And if anything's out of norm, it would basically have some type of alert on it. You could review that and you could course correct it in a back office setting. But outside of that, you have to give customers some type of way to see visibility into potential negative outcomes. You can't assume you're never going to have them. I will tell you this, though. In almost every case after testing, it's very rare. When I say rare, we're talking well less than 1% that we're seeing errors in these automations if they're set up and tested properly. So, but again, they're extraordinarily good. Where companies are going to adapt them is when metrics or analytics show that it's as accurate or more accurate than a human. Then every company is going to deploy it. It's no different than at 6 a.m., walking out of the hotel in London, I could go to McDonald's on my way to catch a train in the airport and get an oatmeal and a coffee, and a machine made it. It was kind of intriguing. I'm shocked, but I get to America and we still got a human doing it. But that was fascinating to me. And that was well before ChatGPT. But essentially, it's the same thing. When it becomes economically smart and the accuracy level and consistency is that or above a human, then AI should replace it. I mean, it's part of being more practical and more productivity for the business, and economically, it bodes well for the rest of the employees in the organization.
Where do you stand on how to measure the impact of these things? Because with NLU, it was very easy, not very easy, but it was easier because you've got like a confidence threshold. You can tag things to say like at this point in the conversation, it was successful, so we can report on that. In this landscape, every conversation is different. They probably all follow a similar pattern, but they don't necessarily always do that. Yeah. So how do you approach analyzing the success of these things?
You've got to apply. It's one, having contextual understanding. We know we can do contextual understanding on the conversation, maybe at high 80s and growing. We also have sentiment analysis that lets us know some insight into whether the customer, just based on text and communication, how they feel. And then from an automation standpoint, you have to be able to fully understand what you're automating to score. And then we have really powerful BI tools. So we capture every element you can data-wise. And then we have very powerful BI tools, and we build really good baseline dashboards and allow our customers then, if they would like, some customers don't want, but if a customer wants, they could have a drill down capability to build their own frameworks and well, I say frameworks, their own frameworks around dashboards, determine what, analytics or numeric values mean most to them. But from our perspective, we look to score every aspect we can, and then you have to also score models. So on the backside of that, and there's 2 or 3 different frameworks. I don't have them in front of me that we're utilizing as part of that too, where we've built our own scoring mechanism for these models. But it's tracking them all the time because it is an arms race there too. Forget just a competitive race with Inbenta versus competitors. These large models are moving very fast, and it's our responsibility to our customers to figure out which model is going to be most applicable. I mean, today we probably use somewhere between 6 and 8 models in different, environments, different use cases, but it's our responsibility to make sure our customers have access to the best models for their use case.
And last question, where do you think that the models will go? Because on the one hand, you've got one group of people that will, like Sam Altman, probably, for example, who is kind of like, we're very close to AGI. We're probably going to have AGI in the next few years. And that's because the models are getting better and better and better. And the more data we have, the more compute we throw at it, the better these things will be. And then on the other side, you've got kind of like, the concerns around whether there is enough data available in the world to actually get it to that level, and if there is enough compute in the world to get it to that level as well. But also, Jan LeCun and Gary Marcus and people like that are of the opinion that actually the fundamental architecture of a large language model will only get us so far. And so, but then for an enterprise, I always kind of say that for an enterprise, you don't need AGI. OpenAI's goals shouldn't really concern you, and the technology that exists today actually is good enough to do 90% of what you'll probably ever need to do. So, like, would you agree with that? Is the technology there now that's good enough to do whatever they need to do, or is there a limit to where these models will go?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, cutting you off. The large models will get much better, but you are right. They'll do everything an enterprise, I think, needs to do. I think the focus is going to shift to consumer experience, which is why Elon clearly. Do not count him out. I know a lot of people are. I would not. I think that he's going to play there. I think Facebook's going to play there too. I mean, obviously, you and I would like to be OpenAI lead developers, considering Zuckerberg just offered $100 million signing bonus to some of their key people. But that's going to be the arms race, is around consumer experience products, and AGI is going to play there. And I think we are, again, it comes down, it's real simple. It comes down to power. So America's issue is electricity. China's issue, I think, is going to be chips. And so it's going to come down to who can produce the compute before AGI really, I think, transforms how we interact to do it. And I think by 2030, we'll have AGI in some really compelling form, but I think it'll be more consumer based. I don't see how it's going to impact enterprises. I think I would agree with you completely. Enterprises can see the future, and I think we're looking at where the enterprise is going to be over the next 10 to 12 years. Very similar when, Office came out, and Lotus Notes was our greatest tool. You're probably too young to know what that is, but in Microsoft Office, I remember being on the team when XP was being built and get to, help shape that app. And when that transformed, everybody's like, oh my Lord, I can do all this with email, then text messages and all this stuff. AI is more like the invention of the automobile, but I think we now know what that automobile looks like. And enterprise AI, I think we've got a good understanding. It's only going to get better, but we are playing with the tools that are probably going to be around 5 to 10 years. But AGI, I think, is going to be consumer impacting. I don't see how it greatly benefits the business. Now, if you're doing gaming, or maybe theater, like movies and stuff, maybe AGI does, translate into a business offering, but I think it's consumer impact.
Interesting. Nice one. So where does Inbenta go next then?
I mean, obviously, we're announcing sometime later this year a new product offering. I'm not going to get into the entire platform name, but we've got a lot of exciting content that's going to hit in October. And I think it really gives us an opportunity to get out in front and be more competitive than our competition. We're going to be more affordable. We're going to be able to get customers live faster and drive a lot more efficiencies for organizations. And we're going to help people realize how agentic AI is going to transform and shape their productivity. And we're going to do it in a meaningful way where they're not trapped. So they feel confident in doing business with us, and they know that we obviously value the relationship with them, and we want to be a partner in this journey, not just get money from or take advantage of them. We want to truly partner in their AI efficiencies and outcomes. So I think that's where we go. It's going to change. I mean, Benta will look different in 6 months, and then you talk to me a year later, it'll look different. I mean, it's part of where AI's at, and we have to adapt and move. Nice.
Merlin, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And best of luck with it all. Hopefully we can speak again soon when the revolution happens, and we'll see how it's going this time next year or something.
Awesome. Thank you, Kane.
Nice
appreciate
one.
it.
Thanks very much. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much.
Right.
Bye now. Nice.
Thank you, man.
Nice one. Cheers, Merlin. Appreciate that.
Appreciate
I will
too,
drop
man.
you a line once it's published in probably a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Nice one. Cheers, mate.